Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Cooper. I'm here to talk to you about responsible AI and hackathons, which is shockingly not inspired by my friend using however many lakes worth of water to get Copilot to invent a story about General Whiskerstein the cat after meowing at it for about 12 prompts. AI is a fabulous thing, and I'm so excited to be part of the new AI boom. My name is Alex Cooper, as I previously said, and I'm all about user friendliness, including this clicker, which I cannot operate because I am stupid. However, I was a previous organizer for ANHACS, and I'm the current leader of the IEEE Consumer Society's Young Prodigies program, which finds people around the globe in late high school and early college to identify early CS talent and get them involved with hackathons and research. I'm also an incoming human-centered AI engineer at MITRE, working on AI assurance and responsibility. You may remember me from previous hackons. You may not recognize me from previous hackons, because before this, I was standing. So AI is huge news for me, and probably huge news for a lot of the hackathon community. But for some people, it's not so much of an exciting prospect. We're living in an age of entry-level jobs disappearing and a very new and unpredictable tech landscape. It's important in these cases not to panic. We've been here before with the internet bubble, with the crypto bubble, and with various different technologies that have revolutionized the landscape. The fact is that because we're at the beginning of a boom, because we don't know what's going to happen next, we have a chance and therefore a responsibility to lead the future engineers and human-centered professionals in the tech industry. Responsible AI should not be something to dread because we have to do it. We, as young hackers, have the chance to change this landscape. This puts us in a unique spot compared to tech engineers maybe a year or two ago. Because things are changing at such a rapid pace, the ability to adapt is crucial. And hackathons are one of the best places for that adaptation and early learning. If we can establish ourselves as tech leadership in this shifting tech landscape, that gives us the opportunity to understand what we're going to further research, and therefore put value on what in AI is important. This means that as we continue those research into those areas, new issues will arise that we'll learn more about. And the areas in which we take that learning define us as tech leaders. Because the responsibility is cyclical, responsible AI is therefore not just an assurance, but a measure of growth. And there's some things we can do as hackathon leaders to make sure that responsible AI is being championed. And I call these the 4 U's. First, unite expertise from tech, social science, and design field. Utilize research standards and institutional values to shape the policy of use of AI in your hackathons. Update your judging criteria to reflect best practices in responsible AI and human-centered design, as well as in the coding landscape in general and what happens in the professional sphere. And uplift different perspectives, not only on AI, but people who might be underrepresented both in the tech field and in the data we're working with and is becoming increasingly mainstream. So the first thing I want to talk about, because it kind of leads into all the others, is the uniting of human-centered and tech fields. I think now is a time when social sciences and tech are more important than ever. And maybe I'm biased as a human-computer interaction and psychology major, but that's, I think, given me the experience that I didn't know I was missing when I initially started out with hackathons. One thing I found amazing about hackathons is that they don't just teach you to code. They teach you to go through the entire problem-solving process. And I think something that is underutilized in the AI field is understanding how social scientists and designers might incorporate into the hackathon landscape in the future as the lines become more blurred between what is coding, what is vibe coding, and what is user-centered design. So I've put here a list of fields that can, I think, all easily input to a hackathon project using AI, including people who have just started or coding and are primarily using AI for vibe coding under the tech sphere, and including user experts who might not have much professional experience with design school, but have personal experience with their own user needs. These people might not be considered professionals, but I argue that they're doing a practice called legitimate peripheral participation. Legitimate peripheral participation is a concept I recently learned in my human-centered computing class, where new members of a community of practice, that is to say, a community focused around doing something like hacking, enter that community on the fringes by starting by doing a lower impact, less risky task, often in a way to model the behaviors of people who are more established in the circle. And then slowly from there, they begin to work themselves to the center of the circle by proving themselves and learning more beyond until they're in the center of this community of practice and can pass that knowledge on to new members. I've really found this resonated with me because I've been a longtime hackathon participant, and I started when I was in high school and didn't know what an API was, and I was making my little program on Replit. And now I'm up here speaking at HackCon again. And the reason I thought this sounded familiar was because MLH has talked about this themselves in their blog. While they don't use the term LPP, they often talk about the pipeline from school to first job and how there's had to be new intermediaries to make sure that people can have the ability to access these projects. Um, MLH jumping into hackathons and the fellowship, I think, was an example of this. The fact that they're encouraging open source is an example of this. And I think we should continue to champion that using AI. However, I think that vibe coding can be in several different spots on this timeline here. And the fact is that it's a continuous learning process. I've done hackathons after internships, and I haven't contributed to open source yet. But I think that vibe coding should be a new step in this process for people who are going to use AI first in a professional landscape, because I can refer you to the previous speech on AI that was on the workshop. Please go talk to the speaker. Um, but people are going to use it. It has already been integrated into the mainstream. So I think from here, we figure out how this fits into our new tech landscape and try to shape this by combining those different fields. And I think one big part of that is setting research standards. I believe that researchers of every field, tech or humanities or arts, should have input on responsible AI and what it means, because it affects all of us. Anyone who's working in an academic or professional landscape now, especially with dealing with the exchange of data or information, has to deal with the principles of responsible AI. And so they should have a voice as to what the field of responsible AI means, especially in a legitimate peripheral participation environment like hackathons or vibe coding. So I think there's several different research standards that we can work off of here. The IEEE, for example, says that when you're working on a research paper, you should disclose in your acknowledgments that you use AI and cite the specific AI model with the date. The ACM says in their research papers that you should provide an appendix with a generative AI disclaimer if you use significant work, providing a list of prompts used and what came of those prompts. And finally, your school or institution is probably already working on a policy for generative AI. Coordinating your professors, people in the professional landscape, and expectations of these leading groups like IEEE and ACM can put us in the space of a leading group as well. So it's up to your group to brainstorm what that might mean for you. But one example might be just adding a category on DevPost where you can put a link to your generative AI use or a summary of how you used it. And helping people figure out how to do giving people workshops or instructions on how to do this part already with generating content and making sure that you give the right credit where credit is due. And this brings me to the fact that, in these categories, we're adding criteria to the competition. And so I think a crucial part is adapting these criteria to new skill sets for the AI age. As AI gets more and more sophisticated, we're going to find movement between what skills are most necessary in the tech landscape and what skills become useful but easily automatable or augmentable. And so I think something that needs to be considered is frequently updating our standards as to what responsible AI means in our own MLH competitions year by year. This can be tiring, but as long as we have an emphasis on making sure people learn, making sure they're learning from vibe coding, making sure they're learning from their projects that ultimately end up super unethical, um, then as long as we're in this low-risk hackathon legitimate peripheral space, that makes sure that we have responsible AI professionals by the time they get to professional spaces. As long as we have this emphasis on learning, what you make those criteria is up to you because you're the ones gathering information. AI standards will inevitably change as we make progress, and so hackathon AI policy should always be changing. But by positioning ourselves as tech leaders and as contributors to the MLH space, we get to decide what that means communally. Okay, I'm finally understanding how this clicker works. Thank you, intuitive design. But we have to make sure that when we're doing this, we have to highlight all hacker perspectives. And that means continuing the work on improving diversity, inclusion, and beginner friendliness in our work, because we don't know who might have not been represented in the text here. We also have to reward things that think outside the box. And that means moving beyond just a ChatGPT wrapper and understanding, even if something isn't flashy, looking beyond to see the underlying technology. The fact is that inclusive organizing leads to inclusive hack. And that's why the work we do at MLH is important. Because I truly believe that this is a way to introduce people to a space where they don't just learn the coding foundations, but they also learn what it means to be a human-centered designer and to code for good. That's the experience I had with MLH, and that's the experience I want to share. And that's why I wanted to bring my perspective as somebody who does human-computer interaction research to talk about how this could be applied to the hackathon community. I encourage you all to think not just like event organizers, but also like researchers, because you now have the opportunity to contribute to a unique kind of citizen science, one where we get to define the future of the field. Thank you so much. And please feel free to contact me at any of these venues if you'd like to speak.